What's up, guys? Welcome back to the LTL Podcast. I am here with Steve,
Hello.
as always. And today's episode, we got some NHL news regarding the Anaheim Ducks. We have an interesting situation that developed between the Arizona Coyotes and the Anaheim Ducks as well. And then we're going to be talking about some of the teams that are starting to lock up some playoff spots here. We have currently two teams that are clinched, the Avalanche and the Florida Panthers. I think the Hurricanes just need a win tonight in any fashion to clinch, so they're basically guaranteed at this point
Pretty much.
to get into the playoffs. And the Rangers are only 2 points behind them, so they're not far off from clinching either. So, a lot of teams should be locking up those spots soon. But we do want to start with the news coming out of Anaheim that captain, Anaheim Ducks legend, I don't think he's their top scorer of all time. I don't remember where he sits on that list, but Ryan Getzlaf, who has been with this team his entire career since 2005, 2006, has announced that he is officially going to be retiring at the end of this season after how many at this
I
point,
think it's
like
16 years or something like that.
17 seasons in Anaheim, 12 seasons as a captain. Won a Stanley Cup with them in 2006, 2007. I'll go to you first on this one. Just, what kind of legacy does a guy like Ryan Getzlaf leave behind in Anaheim? And then also, I guess, what's your reaction to him announcing his retirement at this point?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised he's retiring so early. I still thought he had a couple of years left in him, but I guess, he knows his body better than I do, obviously. But in terms of legacy, he's the closest thing in the NHL scene probably in the last 20 years to Mark Messier. The guy's been everything to a bunch of really highly competitive Anaheim teams, honestly. I mean, I really thought he was going to lead one of those teams to a Stanley Cup in the 2010s there.
Yeah, to have the kind of impact on a franchise that he does, and he is, by the way, their all-time leader in points. I believe he's also their all-time leader in games played, fourth overall in goals, and just all these. He's first overall in assists, all-time points leader. So just an unbelievable career run with one team, and it's hard to really kind of quantify the kind of impact that he's had on his organization, because it's funny when you think about the biggest names that have played for the Anaheim Ducks, right? Guys that have the kind of notoriety that players like Paul Kariya or Teemu Solani,
Hall of Famers, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like guys that just, Scott Niedermayer, some of these names that just jump out at you. And then, I don't, I think that this is actually kind of a testament to the kind of man and player that he is. You don't really, it's hard to like think of him in like that same category because he was never like flashy. He had talent, certainly, and he always has. But I think it's a real testament to just his blue collar. I'm gonna do my job. I'm gonna lead my team, and if that means leading from the back on some nights where I'm letting everyone else do the fancy stuff, and I'm just getting my job done, I think it's a testament to him that Ryan Getzlaf may never have ever been considered the best player in the National Hockey League, but the fact that he's always just done his job, and that's, I think, if you ask him, that's probably the kind of legacy that he would want to leave. Is just a put your jersey on, put your sweater on, and just do the right things at the right time. and do your job for the betterment of the team. And the other thing about Ryan Getzlaf is, his throughout his career, he's put up 954 penalty minutes, right? So it's not like he's a shrinking violet. But I really don't think anyone would ever tell you that he was ever a dirty hockey player.
No.
I think he's probably one of the most well-respected players in the NHL. Like, do you think it's fair to say that?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, you don't get to be captain for, 12 years and not earn some level of respect from your peers?
Yeah, especially, for a guy that plays with the kind of tenacity and the kind of physical nature that he brings to the game, to walk that line for as long as he has, with very, very, very few instances of ever crossing the line, is impressive. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of his influence on a lot of the younger players that he's been there for, to help develop at this point on the Anaheim Ducks. And it's going to be interesting because obviously the answer to this question is you don't, right? But, like, how do you go about replacing just the level of leadership he brings to that locker room,
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think you do.
Like, do you think? I guess this also leads into the question of what does his leaving of the Anaheim Ducks mean for the franchise, in the grander scheme of things?
I think it's just a signal that, like, he understands the team is trying to move on and get younger, and he doesn't want to stand in the way of that, Like, he's just like, all right, I'll go. And I don't think he wants to play anywhere else, so instead of going to free agency and trying to win a Stanley Cup somewhere else, he's just gonna hang him up.
Yeah, and it's gonna be very, like I said, very interesting to see the next layer of his impact on the franchise and in the younger guys that are being brought up and developed at this point. And there's definitely going to be a big hole in that locker room without a guy like Ryan Getzlaf. And no offense to, the guys that they have there now, obviously, but you don't replace a guy like Ryan Getzlaf. Like, it's like when Mark Messier retired, right? Like, you don't just get a new captain that does the same job as him, because he won't, and he never will.
Yeah, no, it just doesn't happen.
But I do think that they have a really good young core. It's just going to be interesting to see who steps up, right, and starts to fill that leadership void. Because for right now, it's probably going to be by committee. You do have some older players like Cam Fowler, who's been there forever. Jakob Silfverberg has been on the team forever. You'll probably have some of these guys step up into more of a lead by committee kind of role, but it's going to be interesting to see the next generation of Anaheim Ducks, if they end up going with a similar style captain, or if they maybe take another approach with it, because it kind of does look like, for all intents and purposes, that the next generation of Ducks are going to be a little bit more like on the higher skill end of things than the 2010s Anaheim Ducks teams, which were, not to say they lacked skill, but they were a little bit more emphasis on like bigger bodies and playing a more of a power forward checking type game. So I guess my final question is, Ryan Getzlaf, Hall of Famer, yes, no? What are you thinking on that one?
I think so. I mean, he's the franchise's all-time leading scorer. I think that counts for something when you're thinking about Hall of Fame, like, considerations, right? I mean, the guy was never, like you said, he was never the best player in the league, but he was always very highly competitive. He always did all the right things, and I mean, he's one of the better two-way players of his generation. So I think, like, that alone should get him some level of consideration.
Yeah, certainly. Like, he never took home like crazy hardware or anything like that. His only trophy really ever is the Ryan Getzlaf Award.
Mark
is
Messier Leadership Award, right?
uh, he is the 2006-2007 Stanley Cup. That's the only hardware he
Oh,
has to his name at this point. Uh, but even still, again, the 1,013 points in 1,150 career games, all-time leading scorer on the Anaheim Ducks, 12-year captaincy. If nothing else, because a lot of the arguments from a lot of people is the Hall of Fame isn't just the Hall of Very Good, it's the Hall of Fame for a reason. But when you combine everything that he's done, and sure, right, he doesn't have the individual awards, right? He doesn't come in with a lot of hardware. But to captain a team for 12 seasons while continuing to put up the kind of numbers he does, or I should say he did, is impressive. And it's not something that's easy to do at all. And the leadership aspect alone, I mean, I genuinely think he's one of the greatest captains we've ever seen in the NHL. So
I'd be inclined to agree.
certainly I would think Hall of Famer, depending on who comes up in his class, whether or not he gets in first ballot, that's up for, the voters to decide. But I can't imagine him getting passed up more than once. Yeah. So hats off to you, Ryan Getzlaf. Congratulations on a fantastic career. The NHL will certainly be missing one of its greatest leaders in the season to come, but hopefully, I do respect his decision to go out while he's still an effective player. He's got 31 points in 49 games this season, but he's making a conscious decision to go out on his own terms while he's still a respectable player instead of trying to squeeze every single ounce of hockey he has left in him and then inevitably being forced to retire at some point. This is much more of a I'm going out on my own terms kind of situation. So
You also have to respect a guy willing to, that's not going to hold his team hostage, He understands the situation in Anaheim, and instead of forcing them to, either make the hard decision and be the bad guy and make him either retire or walk, he's just saying, you know what? I've still got a lot of good years ahead of me, but I've done it, right? Like, he's been to the mountaintop. And realistically, like, Anaheim's not in a position to compete, and he probably doesn't want to, like, uproot his family and, like, his whole life in California, You don't spend 17 years in a city and not lay down some roots.
yeah.
So, I mean, I respect that he's just saying, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to hang my skates up, and that's it. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Anaheim called to put him in some front office position, right? Like whether it's an advisor to the general manager, like we see usually, or some other kind of like public, like not public address, but public like relations kind of situation. I mean, the guy's a legend. Like whether he's an NHL legend is debatable, but like he is an Anaheim Duck legend. You grow up being a Ducks fan from here on out, you will know who Ryan Getzlaf is. And I mean, I think as soon as the season's over, you're going to see the announcement for his jersey retirement.
Oh yeah.
Or they might wait till Corey Perry retires too, which might be after this season too. Who knows? But I think like you'll see both of their names up in those rafters at some point together, as it should be. Whatever you think of Corey Perry now, him and Ryan Getzlaf were the Anaheim Ducks between 2010 and 2015.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, his numbers going up in the rafters guaranteed. I mean, there's no way it's not, like
It's like you said, when you think of the Anaheim Ducks, you think of three players. You think of yeah, I think three players: Teemu Selanne, Paul Kariya, and Ryan Getzlaf.
yeah.
Which it's like, the other two are already up there, so it's only logical that like Ryan's only gonna join them.
Did the Ducks retire? I think they did. Did they retire Jaguar's number?
I think they did it last year, maybe.
Because I think they also did. I believe he played on the team with Jaguar.
He won the cup with them.
Let's see. Anaheim Ducks retired numbers. I don't. Teemu Selanne, Paul Kariya, and Scott Niedermayer are the three that are up there. So yeah, Ryan Getzlaf will undoubtedly be the fourth one.
I mean, I would find it almost impossible to believe that he wouldn't be, right?
Yeah. So again, I agree with you. I definitely think the Anaheim Ducks should basically the night he retired, or maybe not the night, like a couple days after he retires and he's done kind of partying and playing with his family and all that, or not done with that, but like he gets those couple of days, you call him up and he's like, hey, we've got these positions open, right? You can be like a PR guy, you can be like somebody
A
that works with
marketing
like
guy.
our marketing team, or if you still want to be like on the ice, I mean, I certainly think that a role in player development would be available to a guy like Ryan Getzlaf.
I mean, almost certainly, right?
If nothing else, because he embodies the do your job kind of mentality that you want in a hockey player, right?
I mean, so it's kind of funny. He's the complete opposite of Jonathan Taves, right? Like both are consummate winners, both are consummate professionals when it comes to like being on the ice. But Ryan Getzlaf, I think, is a perfect example of like what it means to be a captain. Like he didn't throw his organization under the bus, no matter how questionable he thought the moves they were making were. He never pointed fingers. He never made the situation seem bad. He was always willing to say, well, yeah, we're struggling a little bit now, but we got to get our game in order. And, he always was willing to look at the situation and say, well, what are the things we can do better? Not like what is wrong with the team, but like what can we improve on? And like you said, in player development, like there's almost no way you wouldn't want a guy like that around. Like you said, he literally embodies like what it means to be an NHL player, not even just like a captain, but just to be like an effective NHL player and to bring it every single night, you know? So, yeah, from here at the podcast to you, Ryan Getzlaf, even though you'll probably never hear this, congratulations on one hell of a career. You definitely earned it, all the congratulations and the praises.
And I certainly think we all hope that we see you in some way, shape, or form, if you want it, still involved in the hockey community. But if your next plan is to just live the rest of your life, then obviously you've more than earned that. So congratulations to Ryan Getzlaf. And we're going to stay with the Anaheim Ducks. And speaking of the next generation of Anaheim Ducks, Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras kind of in the headlines on the front lines of an incident with the Arizona Coyotes. And basically the TLDR on this is the Arizona Coyotes were down 5-0, right? I believe it was the third period. And there was a loose puck, right? Or at least what Trevor Zegras would say, he saw the puck, so he thought it was loose, and the ref hadn't blown his whistle just yet, so he went to poke at it, right? The Arizona Coyotes take exception to this, which is completely understandable. Nobody likes when their goalie gets poked, especially,
after the whistle, or what you think to be after the whistle, or when he's got control of the puck.
Right, and it's the third period, the game's over. You don't want your goalie getting hurt in any way, breaking a finger while trying to cover the puck or something like that. Totally understandable, right? What's not acceptable is what happens immediately after, where Jay Beagle cross-checks Trevor Zegras in the back of the head while he's already on the ice, right? And then so Troy Terry, doing the right thing, he comes up to try and defend his teammate. Now, Jay Beagle, Troy Terry, not exactly in the same weight class when it comes to fights. I respect Troy Terry's decision. And Jay Beagle pieces him up a little bit, right? The issue is after that happens already, Jay Beagle has beaten Troy Terry, right? Troy Terry is on the ice. He's given up. He's not fighting anymore. Jay Beagle continues to then hit him over and over and over again. And the real issue here is with the Phoenix Coyotes announcer, who says, and I quote verbatim, "That's the problem with these young players. You want to embarrass guys, you want to skill it up, you better be prepared to get punched in the mouth." They then asked the announcer, "Do you regret those comments? Because you're seeming to imply that Jay Beagle should be able to A, almost break Trevor Zegras' neck, and B, bludgeon Troy Terry while he's clearly given up the fight." And then Nash replied, he said he shouldn't have said the word "skill it up," but rather hot dogging. He didn't like the way the Ducks players smiled and smirked after scoring, and when you do that, what followed is what you have to be prepared for. They also asked him, should Jay Beagle have backed off when Troy Terry was vulnerable? And this guy said, not at all. Excuse my language, but what the fuck? Are you
Oh,
serious?
he's totally defenseless. Yeah, no, just keep pummeling him.
Like, am I crazy for thinking that this is one of the worst takes we've ever seen in our entire life?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there, right? Like this idea, like I don't know, the NHL's in a weird place, right? Like I understand why Jay Beagle wants to give Trevor Zegras a shot, right? He's defending his goaltender. I get it. That's not my problem with the play, right? Like the cross check might have been high, but it is what it is, right? Everybody was okay. Everybody walked away. My problem really is like Troy Terry wasn't trying to fight Jay Beagle. And a lot of people online would say, the Twitter army would say that he engaged him, he should have expected something. And it's like, I mean, no, when you dogpile in front of the net, which let's be honest, like after he cross-checked Zegras, it was a pile up, everybody piled in. There's no reason to start swinging, right? Like that's a very common occurrence in ice hockey. There's always a scrum or something at the front of the net. It happens. Guys are trying to score like Zegras was, and guys are protecting their goaltenders. The problem is when a guy engages you, and you can't tell me Jay Beagle doesn't know who he's on the ice with, right? You know a guy like Troy Terry isn't a fighter. He's not exactly like the toughest piece of work to come out of the league out of development leagues or whatever. Like he's a goal scorer, he's a talented guy. He's doing the right thing, just trying to even the pile up. You want to give him an extra shot or two with your gloves on, whatever. You want to rough him up a little bit, let him know that like he's got to expect like if he rings the bell, someone's going to answer it somehow. But it's very clear that like Troy Terry wasn't trying to engage you in a fight. You know what I mean? Like his gloves never came off, his hands never came up high. He just tried to grab onto him. And even still, the Beagle drops the gloves and Terry drops his, but Terry just tries to hang on at that point. You know the fight's not going to last very long if you're Jay Beagle, and you don't really have to throw that many punches. So at the end of the day, like once he's down on the ice and he's turtled, like why would you keep swinging? You're not proving anything to anybody. Like you're not proving how tough you are. You're not sending a message. You just look like an asshole. You know, like here you are beating up a kid that's pretty much defenseless at this point, and it's like, is it a look you want to be associated with? That's the first thing, right? The second thing is if you're Tyson Nash, why is this the hill you're gonna die on, right? It was a bad take at first, right? But like it being a bad take in the moment is like excusable to me almost. Like I'm willing to be like, hey, he's a hometown or whatever. What do you expect, right? It's like Jack Edwards.
You're down 5-0. You're a little frustrated. You've had a
Yeah,
long season.
yeah. So like even for the announcers, like they feel it. So like I get it. Like he's probably just like, oh, whatever in the moment. But the double down on it is really my problem. Like at no point were the Anaheim Ducks hot dogging or trying to embarrass the Arizona Coyotes, right? Did they keep trying to score goals and did they keep laying it on late into the third period with a 5-0 lead or a 5-1 lead? Yeah, they did. Because they're professionals. They're paid to play 60 minutes. They're going to play all fucking 60 minutes. If you're an NHL player and you're blowing a team out and you're not still trying to at least play hard and play to the end of the whistle, then like you're not a professional. You're not taking it seriously. Like, and it's strange to me for Tyson Nash to have a take like this because he played in the NHL. I mean, granted, it was a brief career as a fourth liner, but like still, he played professional hockey. He understands the mentality on the ice. And even if at the NHL level he didn't experience success, at some point in his career, he had to have been on a good team and been rolling teams over and just been like, oh, whatever, it is what it is. And they don't take their foot off the gas pedal. Whether it was in U18s, U16, Bantam, Junior, whatever. Point being, like, the mentality of the players anyway. We see it all the time. And when you take into account that these are professionals and this is their job to play to the whistle, yeah, they're going to keep trying to light you up. Honestly, if you get lit up 5-1 and your response is to be angry at the other team, then you don't get it. Like if you're getting lit up 5-1, that's on you, bro. You got lit up. Like, I don't understand. Like, how is this the Anaheim Ducks' fault? Because they're better than you? We shouldn't be punishing teams or players for being more skilled than another. That's your own fault. And granted, the Arizona Coyotes are purposely like less skilled and in a position to fail on the ice. But that's not whatever Jay Beagle's beef is with that. It shouldn't be taken out on a player that has nothing to do with his situation. And again, with Tyson Nash saying like they're hot dogging, I mean, did they try like to showboat a little bit, score a couple nice moves? Yeah, of course they did, because they realized the team in front of them was so shit they could. So why not? You're a professional. You're the Anaheim Ducks, right? You're playing in the Pacific Division, which isn't the toughest division in the league, but you still are playing some more competent teams than the Arizona Coyotes on a nightly basis. You don't get a chance to try those kinds of things. So do I blame a team of mostly younger players for getting a little, I guess, overconfident and trying to showboat a little bit? No, not at all. Their star players, or their up-and-coming star players, are like 19 and 20 years old. I think we can all remember what we were like at 18, 19, and 20 years old. When you think you're better than somebody, you want to show off. And I'm not saying that they did, because I don't think they did. But even if they did, this isn't the correct response. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get to just pummel somebody just because you got shit on.
Yeah, like you said, this isn't some beer league game where you're up 8-0 in the second period. You're playing in the highest professional league in the world. Okay, you are at the very top. You are being paid, in some cases, millions upon millions of dollars to play professional hockey, and your job is to score and win games. Now, the other aspect of this is, what does Tyson Nash want, and I guess by extension Jay Beagle want from the Anaheim Ducks? Does he want them to just stop playing in the offensive zone, but like as soon as the Phoenix Coyotes or the Arizona Coyotes get the puck, they're allowed to go as hard as they possibly can in their offensive zone? Because that doesn't make any sense. And then, not for nothing, second of all, let's not pretend that some of these players on the Anaheim Ducks, not necessarily Troy Terry or Trevor Zegras specifically, but some of these players are playing for their careers. They're playing to impress the coach. For a team that's out of the playoffs like the Anaheim Ducks are, who have no chance of making it at this point, basically, these are the games where you make an impression on coach for next season. So you don't give a shit what the score is. It could be 8-0 in the end of the first period. You are doing everything you possibly can to make a good impression to make the team next season. So there's that aspect of it as well. And for him to say that Jay Beagle shouldn't have backed off when Troy Terry was vulnerable is disgusting. It's despicable. It really is. Like, now you're just advocating for blatant physical injury is horrible. It's in many other instances, if you had a take that was that despicable, you would have been fired immediately from many other jobs. I'll just put it that way.
Well, I mean, especially when you're advocating for like essentially the assault of an unwilling participant, right? It'd be one thing if like Troy Terry wanted to go with him and it got pummeled and then he got a little extra afterwards. But like at no point was he trying to fight you. And you know that. You can't tell me you don't know that about a guy that's by the way he approaches you. Like he wasn't coming at you all sorts of sideways. He was just trying to even the pile up. And even if he does come at you sideways and you fight him, like once he's on the ice, that's the end. It's over. You won. He's down. It's out. It's over. The linesmen are going to jump in. Why are you going to keep swinging even after the linesmen have already jumped in? Because it's only more dangerous for everybody involved, right? Because now you have the linesman who might get hit. You also have a defenseless opponent who's being held down now because the linesman's just laying on top of him trying to keep him down so the other linesman can pull you off, and you're just teeing off on this guy. Like, it's the NHL. It's not the UFC, bro. Like, you can't do that to people. You can't ground and pound your opponents.
It's even in the UFC, when the ref gets involved, the fight is over.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, this is like, imagine having this kind of take about the Artemi Panarin and Tom Wilson incident, right? Because some people did, but nobody in positions of like, I guess, authority or
outside
I
of
guess
like Alex Ovechkin.
yeah, I guess like people in positions of prominence, I'll say this. Anybody that like has some level of like an audience. Like nobody was like, "Oh yeah, Tom Wilson was justified." Everybody was kind of like, "Ew, that was a little too much there, Tom. Like you don't get to body slam players head first off the ice. Like this isn't the WWE, bro. Like you don't get to suplex Artemi Panarin off the top ropes." And the same applies here. Like you don't get to just pummel this guy for no reason.
And the worst part about, well, not the worst part, one of the worst parts about this situation is I'm glad you brought up the Artemi Panarin incident because this is kind of just the next logical natural evolution in the NHL's position about after the whistle stuff. Like, I'm not saying Jay Beagle was thinking at the time, oh, Wilson
I'm
got
gonna
away with
abs
this, so I'm going to get
Yeah,
away with this, right? Obviously, he wasn't. He was just seeing red. But the natural progression of these things is the NHL has set a precedent that pretty much, short of like using your stick or your ice skate as
like
a
skates.
weapon,
Yeah,
pretty much anything after the whistle goes, and they're not going to do anything about it because Jay Beagle has faced no discipline for this.
not even a fine.
And by extension, by the way, the NHL hasn't said anything about Tyson Nash, which whether or not they have the legal authority to fine him or not, I have no idea. Probably not, I would assume. But, you know, there's
You still
also
have a
the like
responsibility to say something.
to be like, hey, just FYI, we don't vibe with Tyson Nash saying that vulnerable players are fair game. That's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like advocating for like a goaltender to be fair game, right? Like, oh, well, he's out of his crease, you can truck him. It's like, no, you can't. Like, I know we've said on this podcast before that the goalie's out of the net, he's somewhat fair game, right? Like, you can bump into him, you can shove him a little bit, but like, you can't just blow him up, right? Because he's defenseless. He can't defend himself. With those big pads on, he really can't do anything to stop you from just like eliminating him. So we like that is like not even a discussion we're willing to have, right? Like that's not okay. But for some reason we're willing to let guys who are more defenseless laying face down on the ice get beat up over and over again and just look the other way. And not for nothing, like thankfully there hasn't been any serious injuries from this, right? Artemi Panarin missed some time last year from the Wilson incident, whatever. But like I think that was more just because the Rangers were out of the playoffs and they'd rather him not actually get hurt. But I mean, we're lucky that Troy Terry didn't get any serious injuries from this. I mean, worst case, he could have gotten like fucked up forever. But like, the realistic situation is like he could have bashed his head off the back of the ice, got a concussion, been out for the year. I mean, like any number of things could have gone wrong with when you have this guy essentially tied down to the ice, and you're just bashing his head off the ice over and over again. Like, so the fact that the NHL is just like willfully ignorant of the situation and wholly inept to handle it, seemingly, is a really bad look for almost everybody involved, right? Like the league, the players association, even the players association didn't say anything. And like you think as the legal representation of like these players, they have almost an obligation to say like we don't appreciate someone advocating for the physical harm or not the physical harm, but like the physical assault of defenseless members of our union, like by another member of our union. Like you, so the fact that like nobody is saying anything is kind of wild. And I know the old head argument. I can already hear them, right? Like, well, that's just hockey. Hockey's a tough game. You guys are being too soft. And it's like, no, we're not fucking stupid. We realize that like there are repercussions for these things now. Like it's not 1963 when nobody's wearing a helmet and guys are shooting pucks at 80 miles an hour at their face. You know, like we know that like this kind of stuff is dangerous. That's why the league's made every step to make the game safer. That's why, you know, hits to the head are an automatic 5 minute in a game ejection, and the guy has to go instantly into the quiet room. Like we've done everything to protect these players, short of like outlawing checking, essentially. But we won't do the things that actually would protect them from essentially themselves. You know, because this isn't the first time we've had an incident between the whistles go too far between players of, let's be honest, different calibers. Like, it's not the first time we've seen guys who are kind of benders and only have jobs because they're on the worst team in the league take advantage of guys who realistically aren't in that same kind of boat.
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And to your point, you and I have uh, said on record, and we've debated and disagreed about the different methods and modes of operation of the NHLPA. Um, and one of the things that we've talked about before is NHLPA making statements about their own members, essentially. Um, and I get why the NHLPA might not want to go on record and specifically say this incident is wrong and shouldn't have happened, because they don't want to call out Jay Beagle because he's also in the union. So it gets kind of muddy waters. But
Right.
they have every impetus to call out Tyson Nash because
100%.
yeah, he's not in a union. He doesn't pay union dues. He's not a paying member. He has no legal ties to this organization, nor do they have any moral or social obligations to Tyson Nash, right? Like,
Nope.
I'm very surprised that they didn't take this opportunity to make that kind of statement, because then you're also indirectly making the statement that you want to make but you can't, which is, hey, stop kicking the crap out of each other in illegal ways in between the whistles. If you guys want to fight, you can fight. Stop assaulting each other in
Yeah,
ways that aren't part of the game.
it's not like hockey as a sport. I mean, in the rule book, there are no mechanisms to deal with these things, right? Because like all these like fighting and like after the whistle stuff is technically breaking the rules, but like there are mechanisms inside the game of hockey to deal with these kinds of things. You're frustrated, you want to just go take a run at the guy, just hit him hard, blow him up, and start a fight. Like you can do that. That's completely legal. Like you throw a big hit on a guy with the puck, and then you take it out on whoever wants to answer the whistle or answer the bell, right? We see that all the time. Why wouldn't you just do that if you're Jay Beagle? Like there are so many other options. I understand that like you were protecting your goaltender initially, so initially you're in the right. Whether or not the cross check was right, the intention was. But like everything after that, you have to know time and place. Like I don't care how frustrated you are. I don't care how good of an idea it seems like in the moment. You have to know better than that. Like, and as much as we can like want to put this on, like this is almost wholly on Jay Beagle here, right? Like he just loses his mind, and now he put everybody in like an awkward spot. Like his stupidity made Tyson Nash. I mean, he kind of just exposed Tyson Nash to be the idiot we kind of all assumed he was, right? But it also puts like the NHLPA, the NHL, like all these other people in awkward spots. And it's not like in any other job where you would assault another member of, I mean, you'd be fired, right? If you just like started wailing on one of your coworkers for no reason. Like if you or I went into the office and started teeing off on like Jake at the water fountain for no reason, like we'd be fired instantly. We'd probably be walked out in cuffs.
Oh yeah.
But in a game like hockey where like physical confrontation is part of the sport, obviously you're not going to like arrest the guy for fighting a guy. It would be ridiculous. But that being said, like no other job are you allowed to just like wail on a guy for no reason and face no repercussions at all. I mean, like Jay Beagle walked away from this scot-free. I don't even think there was a penalty on the play. Like he just got to walk away without literally zero consequences. There was nothing on the ice, nothing afterwards. I mean, how does that happen? And again, with Tom Wilson, I think he got fined for the Artemi Panarin thing, but it's like, again, these guys are walking away from these incidents completely scot-free, dude. Like, unfucking scathed. And yeah, I understand that they can only fine them so much under the CBA because they don't want to impose, like, I guess, like, unnecessary or, like, what would be considered, like, insane penalties on these players, right? You don't want to be, like, penalizing a guy, like, $3 million or something ridiculous. But the point is, like, when you're throwing like these really small fines at them and they're not facing like actual repercussions from it because they're not getting suspended and they're not being forced to just forfeit their pay, which usually totals to be more than what they end up being maxed, like fined under the maximal allowance. It's just ridiculous. It's almost like the NHL doesn't have the want, or I guess like for lack of a better, like political will to want to like bring this topic up and really like have the tough conversation about it. You know what I mean?
I think part of the issue is uh, and then actually before I go on to that point, to just kind of finish the logical progression of what you were saying, these guys aren't facing actual repercussions. So, the NHL, what do they think is going to happen the next time the Anaheim Ducks play Jay Beagle, regardless of what sweater he's in, right? The next time Jay Beagle goes against the Anaheim Ducks, he better be prepared because
Someone's coming after him.
Yeah, he's gonna catch something, whether it's
A big hit or a couple of knuckle sandwiches.
I hate to say it, but whether it's a legal play in the books of the NHL or not, he's catching something, and then the NHL is gonna make a big stink about that. Some dude
Yeah,
comes
right.
down and elbows him in the back of the head, and he gets suspended, rightfully so. Might I add, if you're throwing elbows, you're gonna get suspended. But then the NHL won't do anything to prevent that accident from happening or that incident from happening in the first place. And I think the thing is, this is not a gray area. It really isn't. The NHL has set a precedent for not wanting to get involved as an organization with punishment for between the whistles stuff because I think that they think it's a gray area, and in a lot of times, yes, there is some gray area, right? Dudes tangle up between whistles. Sometimes people fall awkwardly. Sometimes people think that they're getting into a fight when they're not. Uh, there are instances where certainly there's gray areas, right? And I don't think we should be taking away scrums after the whistle from the game. I think it's part of what makes the game great, is that it's self-policing to a large extent. But the incident with Artemi Panarin and Tom Wilson, and this incident between Jay Beagle and Troy Terry, these are not gray areas. These are blatant violations of the rules of the National Hockey League. You
I
know
would
what I'm
argue
saying?
almost
Like,
flagrant violations of the rules. Like it's almost like they're spit. Like wouldn't if you're the NHL, wouldn't you perceive these as almost like a spit in the face, like or a slap in the face? I guess that's the actual expression. But like isn't that, it's almost like disrespectful to you, right? Because they don't fear you. They don't respect you enough to say like, oh yeah, like if I do something wrong, they're gonna like penalize me. It's like they know they're not gonna get anything, so they don't care. So to your point earlier, like this is only the logical progression. Like it's only going to continue to escalate, you know? And the NHL has done a lot in the last 25 years to remove, these reprisal things. Like they don't want repeats of fight night at between Colorado and Detroit. As much as fans might love it, or fans in air quotes and love it in air quotes, um, like they don't want that in the game anymore, right? Like they do their best to keep that out of the game. They don't like staged fighting. They don't like that kind of thing. So now you're kind of perpetuating a situation where like that's only going to continue to happen because these guys are getting away with this kind of stuff. If Tom Wilson gets suspended and whatever you think about the Rangers being soft or not, blah blah blah, he gets suspended for that. The Rangers don't feel the obligation necessarily to to send a message that like we're going to handle this because clearly the league handled it. They stepped in and said, okay, this is not okay. We're going to discipline him.
you,
Same thing
you
here with Jay Beagle, right? Like,
yeah, good.
I'm just saying, like, same thing with Jay Beagle, right? Like, the game between the Rangers and the next game between the Washington Capitals and the New York Rangers had 4 fights in the opening 10 minutes. It was ridiculous. You can't tell me something like that's not going to happen the next, like you were saying before, between the Anaheim Ducks and whoever Jay Beagle is playing for. He's marked now, and because the league didn't do anything, that team feels, however wrong or right it is, they feel they have an obligation to stand up for themselves and right a wrong, you know? Because if the league's not going to do it for you, you're not going to do it. You're going to do it for yourself, especially if
Yeah,
they're not going to protect you.
you know, I think there's always going to be an element of teams are always going to want revenge for an act, right? But it's the severity of the reprisal that I think is severely diminished when the league takes appropriate actions, right? So, say for example, Tom Wilson, right? The incident with Artemi Panarin. If he catches like a 5 or 10 game suspension, like he should have, I still think the next time the Rangers played Tom Wilson, that there would have been a fight.
At
Somebody
least
would
one,
have
yeah.
somebody would have went up to Tom Wilson and said, "Hey, let's answer the bell here." But that probably would have been it, because the Rangers say, "All right, look, he's already gotten suspended. The NHL stepped in. We're still gonna handle this ourselves, just so he knows we're not fucking around." But he's already served his time, so to speak. But it's when the NHL does nothing that the ire of this team gets raised from 10 to like 100. Because now you're sitting there going, he has faced no repercussions, he has faced no reprisal, and now we're taking this into our own hands. You know, the NHL has to realize that, you know, instead of like what happened to Tom Wilson, where he got crushed like 3 times with, you know, borderline legal, illegal checks, and then had to fight twice in the first like 15 minutes of the game, which inevitably led to him leaving and then missing the next 5 games with injury. If they just would have handled that situation appropriately, he would have had to have fought, what's his face? The Rangers.
Ryan Reeves.
No. Last year.
Oh.
Ben something? B something? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't remember.
You know, whoever was the first guy to go up to him and ask him to fight, sure, he would have had to have fought him, but then chances are the rest of the game probably would have been physical, but like nothing crazy, right? But now, because the NHL has basically, you know, you said that this is a slap in the face of the NHL, and I totally agree. But the issue is the NHL has basically painted that target on the side of their head and stuck their neck
100%. I'm not saying they haven't.
Right, yeah.
It's just like the fact that they haven't responded to what is like a perceived slap in the face is almost kind
makes
of
it worse.
Dumbfounding. Yeah, you're just like, what? These guys are flagrantly like disregarding you. Like they don't care about what you have to say. And you're paying them. Like they're your employees. You know?
And the real issue is just, you know, again, I get the NHL not wanting to wade into murky waters, but these are pretty clear and clean-cut instances of abuse of a vulnerable player. I don't think that there's, outside of your old heads who are like, oh, I love old-time hockey, and apparently outside of them and apparently George Peros, who apparently sees nothing wrong with these incidences, I think for the most part, 99% of hockey fans would agree that the answer to the question of should you back off when a player is vulnerable is yes. And the NHL apparently is not choosing to fight that battle. And it's pretty embarrassing, honestly. And then for the Coyotes, this is also... Look, there's a lot of shit going on with the Arizona Coyotes right now. Let's just put it lightly and say their standing within the National Hockey League community is not exactly at a high point right now. They're kind of the butt of every single joke. You know, bad last place team. Basically not really much of a future to talk about in terms of a lot of their young guys are pretty much already playing. Financial mismanagement, tax evasion, playing in a college arena. This is not something that this team needs at this point in time. And so I think that they should take it upon themselves to do something about Tyson Nash, because whether or not that's firing him or just coming out with a statement or some kind of reprimand, you've got to address this in some way, shape, or form, because you're already basically seen as a basement-dwelling Bush League organization, and this is not the kind of guy you want to be your literal voice to people across the country who are tuning in. If you're tuning in via ESPN Plus, he's the guy you're gonna hear, and it's not a good look. It really, really isn't. I kind of cut you off when you were saying something in the middle of that.
It's all right. No, I can't remember what I was gonna say. Yeah, no, I lost it. So you're good to go.
It's just there's a lot wrong. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, isn't this essentially like a mutually assured destruction now? Because like the NHL is only forcing these teams to like escalate this, and it's only gonna get worse from here, right? Like these things are only gonna continue to get worse. And to your point about the NHL not wanting to wade into murky waters, doesn't really make a lot of sense in the situation, because they've waded into far murkier waters. Like they have mired themselves in far worse controversies than this. You know? Like, and this isn't even that controversial. The controversy is that they aren't doing anything. Right? So like they've created their own murky water. Like they've kicked up their own like soot in the water so they can't see through. It's like, dude, this was such an easy slam dunk. You literally could have seen the answer. Like, 7 miles down the road, you would have known what the right thing to do was. Like, the fact that you didn't do it is what made this so controversial, you know?
Yeah. And the issue being going forward, at any point, if the NHL does decide to wade into those waters, now it's like, well, why did you wait so long, right?
Yeah, right. You've only made it worse for yourself.
So I don't know. This whole situation to me is disgusting. Jay Beagle is he's a bad hockey player for what he did. He's a kind of a bad person for what he did. I'm not going to indict him completely across his whole career, but to do
This was
what
pretty
he
bush
did
league.
is pretty bad. The NHL is taking a huge L in this whole thing. The NHLPA kind of also somewhat catching a little bit of an L, maybe a lowercase L. Uh, and for the Coyotes, this, like I said, your standing within the NHL community is bad enough. Like, not to pick on the Coyotes, but I'm not gonna mince words about. Generally speaking, for the most part, people don't care about this team. And if your only time you're making headlines is because your color commentator is saying something completely asinine and brain dead, on the heels of a garbage season where you're going to be playing in a college rink next year, you've got to clean it up. And if this new Coyotes ownership is really as serious as I hope them to be, and what we've seen so far, they appear pretty serious about getting this organization back on track. Uh, Accountability, it's got to start somewhere, and I'm very disappointed that we haven't heard anything from the Arizona Coyotes about this since then. So it kind of seems like, to me at least, the indication is that they're okay with your silence is almost an endorsement essentially at this point. So
Pretty much, yeah.
we'll leave it at that. Won't pick on the Coyotes anymore for being an absolute garbage fire of an organization, and we'll move on. So with the last 10 20 minutes or so, just quickly want to ask your opinion on the two teams that we have clinched so far, the Florida Panthers and the Colorado Avalanche. Where do you see these teams as far as, like, are they Stanley Cup contenders for sure? Are they borderline? Are they, what do you think about these two teams?
I think Florida is showing themselves to be the real deal, but Colorado, I still have a lot of question marks about. I don't think they really did anything to address a lot of. I mean, they did make a move at the deadline for a defenseman whose name I can't remember now. Wasn't it
Josh
Josh
Manson, I
Manson?
believe.
So I mean, they made some moves to address those things, but I still think they're kind of a glass cannon. And I mean, they could do damage, right? They could get red hot and just score and pretty much score their way to, a deep playoff run. That's how good that forward core is, but if they can't hold leads or defend as well as like they're going to have to in the playoffs, I don't think they're going to get very far. Whereas Florida has shown they can both score a lot of goals and fill nets, but they can also defend and hold on and win a 1-0 game if they have to. So I think in terms of those two teams, I think Florida is really showing that they're the real deal, and the moves they made at the deadline only made their team better, right? Essentially subtracting Frank Vitrano for Claude Giroux in that top six is an immediate upgrade. Like, I don't care who you are or where you're from, like that's an automatic upgrade. And he's shown that he's fitting in quite nicely in Florida. I mean, he had 2 assists in his first game. He had, I think, a goal the other night or a couple goals the other night. So Florida's looking dangerous. They're deep. And I mean, they're going to give a lot of teams a rough run in the playoffs. Like, I think even the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to have a hard time trying to get past the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I think the Florida Panthers are far and away, in my opinion, the best team in the Eastern Conference, and not just because they have the best record. We've fallen victim to that kind of mentality before when it came to teams like the 2019 Tampa Bay Lightning. But when you look at this roster up and down, you don't see the kind of issues that we saw with the Lightning roster, where the Lightning roster didn't really have much depth. They couldn't defend all that well. They were kind of soft. you don't see that with these Florida Panthers. There's no real glaring weakness that I can point to on this team. They've got great depth. Their centers have incredible center depth. They have essentially what's their version of a Jonathan Taves or an Anze Kopitar in Alexander Barkov, right? One of the most underrated defensive centers in the NHL, or two-way centers in the NHL. Um, the wings are fantastic. They have grit with guys like Sam Reinhart and Patrick Hornquist, Anton Lundell. Uh, the defense, you add back in Aaron Ekblad, who's projected to be able to start the playoffs after his unfortunate injury. You've got defense that can score with guys like Aaron Ekblad. You've got guys that can really put a hurting on people like Radko Gudas and Ben Sherratt. And then you get down to the goaltenders, and you've got either Sergei Bobrovsky or Spencer Knight. I mean, there's no weakness on this club. The only weakness you might be able to point to is a general lack of familiarity with the playoffs from some of the core players. And maybe you could argue the head coaching situation. It's not some 10-year league veteran, right? But I don't think any of that is really the roster on paper is just so good that I think they're guaranteed, or not guaranteed, I should say, a bona fide Stanley Cup contender. Colorado, I do agree. There's a lot of issues on this roster that haven't been addressed yet. Primarily just the defense being a little squishy. You have Jack Johnson, Eric Johnson, Kurtz McDermott, and Josh Manson, who are all pretty big boys. These guys are all sturdy individuals, but Curtis McDermott, I don't know if you'll see all that much ice in the playoffs. I kind of doubt it. Jack Johnson the same way. So really you're kind of relying on Eric Johnson and Josh Manson to really kind of carry the size department. Because Bowen Byram, Sammy Gerard, Cale Makar, and Devon Tays, who are four really big pieces on their top four, are all under 200 pounds. They got bullied by the Vegas Golden Knights in the playoffs last year. That was the big thing I noticed, that they could not get the puck out of their zone because their defense was constantly being hemmed in by these bigger forwards of the Vegas Golden Knights. And then when the puck was in their zone, they couldn't win any of the puck battles along the boards because they just weren't big enough. I do think the forward core is fantastic. Depth is fantastic. They have grit, obviously with guys like Nicole Kubel and Nazem Kadri, even a guy like Gabriel Landeskog. I think this team has pretty much everything going forward except that size on the back end, and it's still a little worrying when you consider that as of right now, it looks like the Colorado Avalanche will be taking on either Nashville, Dallas, or Vegas in the first round of the playoffs. Three teams that are pretty big, all things considered. So I would say the Colorado is a bona fide Stanley Cup contender, but only barely, right? They're barely in that Venn diagram. They've barely crossed into that little section, but I think if everything goes right, that they should be able to compete. But I mean, Florida to me is like a lock for at least a deep second round, probably third round, and then potentially all the way running it up to the Stanley Cup Finals. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the nature of the league this year, right? Like the Eastern Conference is shown to be like way more competitive than the East. The Eastern Conference has been more competitive than the Western Conference. Like there's some good teams in the Western Conference, but there a lot of the teams that we expected to be like lights out great in the West haven't been that good. And in the East, it's been kind of the opposite. Where like some teams we didn't think were going to be all that like we're going to be good, but we didn't think we're going to be great, have been really good, and it's forced the good teams you already do to be good to get even better. Which is why I think like a team like Florida taking all these steps and only adding to the roster that was already succeeding in a highly competitive division is just, I mean, it really pushes the needle for me. I think I don't see a team in their division that's realistically I would say flat out is going to stop them. Like they could lose to any of those teams. Don't get me wrong, they're all good teams, but like looking at it, I don't see it and go, yeah, that's a tough matchup for them. I don't see them really being able to do anything with that. You know what I mean? Whereas like Colorado, like you said, I could see a couple of tough matchups where I'm like, that's they might not come out of that. No matter how good they are, they might not just be able to handle it. And the fact that they're pulling either Nashville, Vegas, or Dallas in the first round is not great because those are all bad matchups, like you said. I mean, just Nashville alone is like the worst nightmare for the Colorado Avalanche. Specifically, like you said, like a team that has a hard time in the size department and tends to get bullied along the wall. I mean, Nashville leads the league in fighting majors,
Hmm.
which isn't, a barometer for that, but it's a barometer for the fact that like they play a physical game. Like they are willing to go there and they're willing to rough it up, you know? And I don't think Colorado has the same willingness to do that. I mean, sure, they'll be willing to mix it up a little bit, but like, do you really want Nathan McKinnon fighting if he has to? Like, you don't have guys to not necessarily protect him, but to, let him do his thing and not have to worry about getting hit or trying to like have to protect himself from the other team.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just something that they haven't addressed. And if they play the way they played in the playoffs last year, they're in for a big disappointment, which it unfortunately is looking pretty likely, right? So,
Yeah, unfortunately.
is there anything you want to talk about last minute before we wrap up here?
Um, oh, so I did see this interesting tweet, right? And I know we've talked about it at length before. The idea that the play in the playoffs, the referee will put his whistles away. So a former NHL referee tweeted his yearly breakdown on how many penalties he called in the regular season and how many games he called in the playoffs, and it broke it down by penalties or power plays per game. And statistically, his power plays per game went up in the playoffs, but I still don't think that's necessarily like a good barometer, right? Like, I don't think he's making a good faith argument, personally. Like, sure, that's your methodology, but like we've seen how it's played out real life, The playoffs tend to have their own rule book, and we've had this conversation before whether it's a good thing or not, and I think we both agree that it's really not. Like the game should be called a consistent way. Um, but I think this is just like a bad take. It's kind of like the Tyson Nash thing. It's like why would you do this to yourself? Like you're just gonna draw unnecessary ire to yourself, and it's actually I'm curious because like he only highlighted a couple of years, like the most recent years, but I'm curious to see if it's a consistent pattern for him, just in general. Like if every year his playoff uh numbers were actually higher than his regular season numbers.
I
But
think, uh, to a certain extent, you know, I think you're completely correct in saying that NHL refs always call playoffs differently. You just do. Um, Whether or not it's a good thing is a different debate. Personally, I don't have much of an issue with it, honestly, because I do think that in the playoffs the game should be decided by the players. But I also think that that mindset goes a little too far sometimes, and we see things that are blatantly penalties that are let go. Uh, so whether or not, again, it's a good thing is up for debate. I would say, generally speaking, I do agree that you should be consistently calling the same way you would in a regular season, just because that's really the only fair way to go about it. Uh, but him just using like himself as this like bookended argument for the fact that all refs do it. I mean, come on, let's. You don't even have to track the stats. You can watch the game and you can just tell that smaller ticky tack stuff that might have gotten a penalty call in the second period of a regular season game. Quite frankly, come the third period of a close playoff game, you have to do something either that they have to call, like literally cannot avoid calling, like a puck over glass, or you have to do something blatant in order to get a penalty call. So maybe that one referee was consistent, and I applaud him for that. I think that's applaudable to be able to say the the guy you're getting for your regular season game is the guy you're getting for your playoff game. But come on, I mean, let's not.
I feel like that's the be all end all of the argument. Like,
let's not be silly about it. We all know the refs call the playoffs differently, and again, whether or not they should is a matter for debate. But the blatant reality to anybody with two eyes is that it's a different game come playoffs. It really is.
to follow that up, his other argument was that players are more aware in the playoffs and that they are more aware of like what kind of things are going to get called. And I was like, what are you talking about, bro? I literally see guys just try to like put guys through the boards every time in the play. Like I see like plays that are almost wouldn't be like done in the regular season because they know they're going to get away with it. There's more grabbing, there's more slashing, there's more hooking. Like everybody knows that. You know what I mean? Like if anything, the mentality is the opposite. They know as soon as the playoffs start, they're like, oh yeah, I can get away with more. I don't like now. I'm not going to be as disciplined because I'm not going to get that ticky tack call like I would in the regular season. Now I can essentially like I can get away with a little bit of a chop if I want to, or I can get away with a little bit of a grab in front of the net if I have to. You know what I mean?
I think that there is something to be said for players being maybe not aware. That might not be the word that I would use, but maybe the younger players would be a little bit more hesitant to do something because they don't want to cost the team the game. But I think like, as a veteran player, as you get along, you kind of realize, okay, like you said, I can get away with a little bit more, so I'm going to do this or do that, right? Because I know it's not going to get called. So I think it goes both ways. I think it kind of evens itself out. There are going to be players who are aware of the stakes and are going to be minding their P's and Q's, so to speak. You don't want to be the guy in the box when overtime winner is scored. You don't want to be that guy. So, some players might be a little bit more aware of that. Other players, quite frankly, take advantage of it. So I think ultimately it's a net neutral. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
So I don't think that's a very compelling argument. I think there's elements to both sides that kind of even that out ultimately at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean it's certainly a debate that we can get into when the playoffs start, whether or not it is a good thing, because I think that is a compelling argument to be had. But I do agree that him trying to use himself as a barometer for all referees when, look, we've been watching hockey for, I don't know, like 16 years now,
Something like that, yeah.
I'm 24, so I've been watching hockey since I was like 4, but obviously I didn't really understand the game until I was like 14, 15, 16. So I've been really truly understanding the game on a more appreciative level for, between 6 to 8 years. So come on, you can't tell me that my eyes have been just lying to me when I've watched over, when you watch as 75% of every playoff game per year, I would argue that both you and I probably hit somewhere close to that mark. You know what I'm saying? Like, come
More
on.
or less, yeah.
Like,
It's just like, bro, like now you're just feeding me shit and trying to tell me it's chocolate. Like, come on. We all know it's not true.
there's nothing, and I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong. Again, this gets into the debate that we can get into at another point, but I don't think there's anything even wrong with just admitting and being like, listen, the playoffs are a different animal. There's merit to that argument as a referee, but especially if you're retired, right? Because at that point, you have no skin in the game.
Yeah, you don't care. There's no repercussions for you.
But yeah, so we will earmark that, and we will get into that when the playoffs start, because there's certainly going to be a controversial call or non-call in a playoff game that we'll definitely get into.
Oh,
that.
almost inevitably.
So yeah, I guess next week more teams will have been clinching, so we'll kind of get into those teams that clinch in similar fashion to us discussing the Avalanche and the Panthers. As the teams clinch, we'll kind of give you guys a rundown of, do we think they're legit? Do we think they're just here for the ride? What the case is. Like I said, probably by next week, Carolina, the Rangers, Pittsburgh, Toronto, and Boston and Tampa Bay will probably have mathematically guaranteed locked up their playoff spot by that point. The Capitals are still kind of out in the air. I mean, they're basically all but guaranteed at this point to lock it in. They're just a little bit behind in terms of points. And then in the West, by that point, Minnesota, Calgary, and St. Louis probably will have locked it up. So we'll be discussing what those goes on. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe the Hurricanes lose the next 6 games in a row and don't clinch until the final day of the season or something stupid like that. Who knows?
Something absolutely bananas.
We do want to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys again next time.